This is Between the Brackets, a Mediawiki podcast, episode 60, May 12th, 2020. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren, and my guest for this episode is Amir Aharoni, who works for the Wikimedia Foundation as a strategist in the product department in the language team. I've met Amir in person a few times back when I used to go to Wikimania. You wouldn't know it from his name, but he actually grew up in Russia before moving to Israel. Amir is the first person who's been on both this podcast and the Wiki Jabber podcast, which has interviews of Wikipedia users. And I think he's also the first person to have been profiled on the Wikimedia blog. So clearly I'm talking to a celebrity in the Wikimedia world. And for those who are interested, we're once again going to be doing a short talk in Hebrew after this, which will be released as a separate episode, just like I did with Yaron Koren. The rules will be the same. No tech stuff, no politics, just some Hebrew. So anyway, Amir, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Where specifically do you live in Israel?
In Jerusalem.
Great. I'm told that's now the capital of Israel.
Okay. You begin with trolling right from the start, right?
Sure, why not? So you're actually the second Russian Israeli who's been on this program. The first was a guy named Stas Malishev.
Yep.
Although he lives in the U.S. now, and I think he's actually from Ukraine, but close enough. This might be a personal question, but I'm guessing Aharoni is not your original last name. What was it, Aronovich or something?
Aronson.
Aronson, okay. Huh.
Yep.
So that gets us into languages stuff, actually, although I want to talk about a few other things first. First of all, how are you doing with this virus lockdown?
It's insane, but, we live. Life goes on. I have two small children, 1 year old and 5 years old, and I have to be with them all day now. So it's crazy, and in a few years we'll recall this time as a time of, I don't know, complete insanity.
Extreme closeness.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's fun. So I as you said, I was born in Moscow. I speak Russian and I speak Hebrew in Israel. So with my children, I speak in both languages. And during this time, the older boy learned to read Russian and Hebrew, which is good. Homeschooling surprisingly works well, despite all the craziness. So there are lots of good things happening too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's great that you're keeping a positive attitude. It's very important.
No, there's no choice. Otherwise,
yeah. I just wanted to briefly say. So you were working from home even before this, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's another argument for being a software developer. Maybe especially in open source, is that you can do all the same work from home, and that's often the lifestyle anyway. I mean, I can't even imagine what life is like right now for the maybe hundreds of millions of people who can't work. It's pretty. It's pretty sad. I definitely hope things change soon for them especially, but really for all of us. So on to happier things. I listened to your Wiki Jabber podcast. You talked there about having liked to read encyclopedias a lot when you were young, I guess, growing up in the Soviet Union. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Soviet Union. There were lots of things about the Soviet Union that were not so great. But there were also some things that were pretty great, like education was pretty great. And the literature and the publishing, all these things, they functioned pretty well in the Soviet Union in several languages, actually. Obviously, Russian was the most dominant, but there were also several other languages in the Soviet Union, schools with textbooks in various languages. And they printed lots of encyclopedias, general encyclopedias. There's the famous Great Soviet Encyclopedia, which is famous for being pretty great generally, except all the censorship and the political bias. It was published in at least
It
Yeah,
was called
it was
Great
called.
Soviet Encyclopedia?
No, that's the actual name.
Oh, okay.
I mean, great. No, that's the actual name. It
Yeah.
was simply because it's big. It was I don't remember 20 volumes or maybe more.
Oh, well, yeah.
It
Oh,
was
yeah,
published in
standard.
at least 17 languages, I think. And also all kinds of encyclopedias for children and all kinds of specialized encyclopedias. I still have at home an encyclopedia of mathematics in Russian, and then an encyclopedia of linguistics in Russian. They are just brilliant, like a whole encyclopedia, a whole like thick volume, all of it with articles about mathematics, and another one about linguistics. And and I had encyclopedias for children. And I loved reading them. They were very nicely printed, very clear language, nice illustrations. I loved learning stuff, and that's why I love doing what I do for Wikipedia and other related websites. Like I hope that there are millions of other children who can, thanks to Wikipedia, who can learn at any age, and hopefully in their language.
Yeah, sure. Well, we'll get to all that. Let's not jump ahead here.
Yeah.
I used to like reading encyclopedias too when I was a kid, and fact books, like trivia books, like 1,000 facts and all that kind of stuff. There's some. I should have done my research on this. I'm thinking of a specific Russian encyclopedia it's like two people's last names or something like that.
Fandom and Lifshitz, maybe?
I don't know. Oh well.
Brockhaus and Efron.
That's the one. Yes.
Yes, that's a famous one. It's
okay.
Very old. It's about 100 years old or even more. That's a very curious one because the Brockhaus is actually a German publishing house, and they published an encyclopedia in German. And in Russia, there was never a big encyclopedia published until then. And then they just decided to translate a lot of articles from German, and then to add some Russian articles of their own. And that's how the first large-scale encyclopedia project in the Russian language was born. It was about 100 years ago. It was a pretty great success. I read about it recently. And it's so beautiful to see how a lot of the same things that are happening to Wikipedia happened to that encyclopedia 100 years ago. How they had to decide about spelling foreign names, for example, because they had to write suddenly a lot of foreign names from a lot of different countries. So they had to decide whether when to write William and when to write Wilhelm and so on.
Right.
And they had an editorial policy about this, and they had a lot of discussions about this. And these are the same things that you now hear happen in Wikipedia, which I guess is a proof that Wikipedia is a real encyclopedia.
Well, it's proof that there's been pedantic people throughout history, I guess. Thankfully,
and it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
we need such
absolutely. People. Yeah. So you also have an obvious love for languages, as you mentioned. On your Mediawiki.org page, you list 14 languages that you have at least some basic knowledge of.
Okay, I guess I lied, but okay.
I was thinking of trying to test you, but
no, go for it. Go for it.
Well, no, I
don't remember by heart right now. I don't remember by heart right now which ones these are, but some of them I actually know. Some of them I learned at some point in my life, and I can kind of figure out what does the page say if I read it. Some of them I guess I just added to test some software feature that something works. Just I don't know. Like some of them are possibly listed with like zero knowledge because I was just testing some.
Oh, I see. No, I think all of these had at least level 1.
Okay, maybe.
I don't know. Esperanto struck out at me because I'm
Esperanto. I actually learned.
Yeah,
I can read and speak it a bit. Yeah.
Huh. Cool. Yeah, it's I'm always amused by it. It's cool, but it's also kind of amusing. So what attracts you to languages and linguistics?
Well, retroactively, I think I know what it is, but I can tell you how it began. I grew up in Moscow, and when I was 5 years old, I already learned how to read, and then we went for a vacation with my parents. We went for a vacation, and it was in a small town in Ukraine. And then my parents explained to me that it's Ukraine, and they speak a similar language to Russian, but it's a bit different. And they also write in the same alphabet, but like they have some different letters. And it was a lot of fun for me to read signs in Ukrainian and to notice the differences between Ukrainian and Russian, and to listen to people speak in Ukrainian. And it was just a lot of fun for me. And that's really how it began. And like literally since I was 5 years old. And retroactively, as I'm thinking about this, why do I love this so much? There's just something beautiful in knowing that you can write about the same thing in different languages, and it will kind of be like, it will be the same information, but expressed differently. And the necessity to express the same thing differently, it's a beautiful challenge.
Okay.
Like languages that don't have a formal verb tense, like past and future and present, but you have to tell a story that involves past and future. How do you do this? You do this, like eventually you have to do something, and as a translator you come up with something, and then you do this, and you tell the same story, and maybe you'll have to explain something in a different way, but in a way that your readers will understand eventually. I just find this challenge very beautiful, and that's really it.
Yeah, that's always a really interesting concept, translation. You know, when you have a pun in some other language, to try to translate that, or just come up with a new pun, or just forget the whole thing. Those kinds of questions. And I think maybe that's something that comes up more in Europe, Eastern Europe, or just Europe, or just, well, maybe everywhere in the world except North America, United States and Canada. Maybe really just the United States, actually. We're really in a sort of a language bubble. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I love packaging of consumer products, because you see like descriptions and various precautions, and if it's sold, if it's sold in Israel or Russia or Germany, it will usually be in a lot of languages of Europe. So it will be like German and French and Italian and Estonian and Ukrainian, and recently they started adding like Eastern Bloc countries like Albanian and Mongolian and stuff like that. It's beautiful. Okay. It's beautiful. I don't know these languages, but I love looking at these things. I'm such a nerd. I love looking at these things and comparing the words and what do they say. And in the US, you rarely get this. In the US, you get English, obviously, and you get quite often you get French, because you need this for Canada. Quite often you get Spanish and Portuguese, and that's about it. Sometimes you get Chinese.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the whole thing with tiny writing in 10 different languages on every package you see, that's really a European thing.
India a few times, and you buy like in Indian supermarkets, you have very, very long shelves of different spices, and on all the boxes you have the name of the spice in the different languages of India. It's wonderful, and you get Hindi and Punjabi and Tamil and all the others. And they all have different alphabets too. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's such a great challenge for designers also to find room for all of these things on the little boxes.
Right. Well, that gets us. Yeah, sure. That gets us into my next question. You might be the first person who's been on this podcast who I would say really has a brand or a mission statement, although. Potentially Denny Vrandicic fits that category too, but correct me if I'm wrong here. In your case, I would say it's something that's right on your Twitter profile, which is most people don't know English.
That's true.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's obvious, of course, and yet it's not. It's easy to forget. Can you talk about that some more?
Yeah, well, most people don't know English. That's a fact. That's a fact that lots of people forget. Um, uh, it just happens to be the same person who also happens to be my manager in some way, Catherine Maher. She once said that when you're a fish, you forget that the water is wet, and
Right.
that's how it is when you are in the US or when you are in the tech industry.
Right.
You are
Right.
surrounded by English all the time. But that's not how the whole world works. And you have you have countries where you have countries where you need to know English, otherwise where the local language is not English, but you have to know English, otherwise you don't progress in your life, educationally and professionally,
Sure.
which is not so good. There are other countries in which you have a local language, and this language is developed. It's developed in the sense that there were people, or governments or businesses or whatever, who invested some time and resources in writing textbooks, writing user manuals, translating books, writing original books, whatever is needed, training teachers to speak in the local language and teach people. Most of Europe is like that. Obviously, the US is like that. Asia is not always like that. Japan is definitely like that. China is definitely like that. India, very partly. Africa, not so much. In Africa, in most places, you need to know English or French, because they haven't developed their education and business in their languages yet. Maybe they will someday. I really hope that they will someday, but this hasn't happened yet. And I think that Wikimedia movement, as a part of it, also the Wikimedia Foundation, but really the Wikimedia movement really can play a very big role in this, in developing the languages of the whole world, because we have this platform which is quite easily accessible to anybody who is connected to the web. And on this platform, we, at least in theory, give an opportunity to any language to write to write anything in any language. And it's more successful for some languages, it's less successful for others, but I really find myself here in the right place, and I really believe in this mission. I really believe that we can change the world and help people develop themselves without having to learn a foreign language. It's
Sure.
just unthinkable. It's just unthinkable in the U.S. that you go to school and the school doesn't function in English. It's unthinkable. But in most African countries, if you're lucky enough to have a school at all in your town, because not every place has a school, if you're lucky enough to have a school, it's quite likely that the school functions only in English or French. And you have to do this. And some children do, and some children don't, which is a shame, because you could have a child who is talented for mathematics or engineering or medicine or creative writing or whatever, but they cannot really get the tools they need unless they also learn English. And if they don't have a talent for languages, tough luck. And this is really not great.
Sure. Yeah. Just briefly, I want to get back to that idea. Just briefly, that reminded me. I mean, speaking of the English bubble, I guess when I first started doing Mediawiki development, it's just seeing all the translations that people were doing of the language messages I created for my extensions. I specifically remember a language called Telugu. Seeing that people had translated into that language, I was looking up all the languages that people were doing in, and I was shocked to see that it's I can't even remember, 80 million people
Something
speak
like that.
language.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a language in India. I'd considered myself pretty knowledgeable about the world, but I had never heard of this language. And it's I think there's more people speak that than French or German or Korean. Yeah, just interesting example of the kinds of things that you just it's very easy to miss, to not think about. So in terms of Wikipedia, maybe information on the web in general, where in the world do you think there are the biggest gaps between the supply of information in that language and the demand for information?
Pretty much all of Africa, except the Arabic language.
Right.
Obviously, quite a lot of people in African countries also know English or French, but definitely not everybody. Definitely not everybody. And that's, when you come as a tourist to an African country, you get the feeling that everybody knows English because you know English and you speak to other people in English.
Sure.
But you just don't speak to other people who don't know English. But in most African countries, most people don't know English. And pretty much all the Wikipedias in languages of Africa are extremely small, with much fewer than 10,000 articles, often fewer than 1,000 articles, which is sad. One of the things that I'm trying to do as part of my role is finding ways to get this to grow. It's very challenging, but we're not giving up on that. And some of these languages are spoken by many millions of people.
Right.
Literally today, I found a few languages. I was going over some lists of people who speak some languages in some countries, and I found languages that are spoken by more than 1 million people, and I've only heard about them today for the first time.
Oh wow!
And
okay, yeah.
I am famous for being very interested in this, and even I haven't heard of them until today. So and millions and millions of people who cannot read Wikipedia in any language, because if they only know one language and the Wikipedia in that language is too small or doesn't even exist, then they don't have Wikipedia. That's the digital divide in a very real sense.
Yeah. Are there languages within Africa that serve as kind of a lingua franca, like everybody's second language if they don't know English is whatever that
not everybody's, but the biggest one of these is obviously Swahili.
Yeah.
That's quite famously. Hausa in Western Africa is quite known for that. Arabic in some countries.
Oh, okay.
In Southern Africa, it can be Afrikaans or Dutch. For some areas, for some groups. But yes, Swahili is probably the biggest of these. But again, not everybody knows Swahili either.
Yeah. It's strange talking about this digital divide or whatever you want to call it, because if you just view the online postings, the blog posts of the Wikimedia Foundation, you might think the biggest problem with Wikipedia right now is that there's not enough articles about female scientists. That seems to be one of the big constant themes. When you're dealing every day with these major problems with support for different languages, does the whole focus on the gender gap start to feel a little, I don't know what the word is, narcissistic maybe?
First world problem, maybe you wanted to say? It's a problem that is easier to address because I really don't think that it's a problem that people deal with it. There are people who care about this. There are people who want to address this. There are pretty clear ways to address this, and you know how to do this. Addressing the language gap is more challenging because you have to. Because like female scientists, fine. You find information about female scientists in reliable sources, and you just invest some time into writing articles about them. And the biggest challenge there, and it is a challenge, right? I'm absolutely not. I'm not devaluing this, but it's challenging. You sometimes have to convince that a particular female scientist is encyclopedically notable and something like that. But but fine. There are ways to address this, and I applaud the people who do this. It's not a problem. Some people want to address language gaps, like me. Other people want to address gender gaps, like other people. So fine. I guess that there are more people at the moment who can address the gender gap, and I applaud it. No problem. Language gap is bigger. It's much more difficult to address. It doesn't get a lot of attention. It should get more attention, and I understand why doesn't it get more attention, because people write about these things, about these problems of gender gap, mostly in English too.
Sure.
All the not all, but a lot of the people who care about the gender gap, they also write in English and they read in English. And when it's this kind of systemic bias. You have to address this in other ways. I'm trying to talk to people with whom I can talk, and I can mostly talk to people in English. But I try to find people in English who know other languages, and I'm trying to encourage them to write in their languages and to tell their friends that they should write more in their languages. These are the tools that I have at the moment. And yeah, it's a big, difficult problem, but I'm not giving up.
Great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I think you're more positive about the whole gender gap thing than I am,
shouldn't they be? It's a good thing. It's an important problem to address. I translated an article about the female scientist from English to Hebrew a few days ago. It was a very interesting article. Yep. So.
Okay. All right. You did your part.
A very small part, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you work for the Wikimedia Foundation. When did you join?
I joined the foundation in 2011.
Yeah. And what do you do for them now?
I started as a software developer. I was in the same team throughout this whole time. I started as a software developer. Then I was a product manager for some time. And now I'm called the strategist, which means that I tried, basically what I just said. I try to find ways to address the language gaps and to find what software do we need, like what big software challenges do we need to resolve in the long term to make addressing the language gap quicker and easier. What are the big gaps, both social and technical, in our language support? And I write all kinds of long documents and emails about them. That's in fact what I do.
Do you do any software development anymore?
These days, not very much. I make a lot of small patches, like in practice. I make a lot of small patches to all kinds of configuration around languages. Like every now and then, people want to change the name in which, change the way in which the name of their language is spelled, because like years ago, somebody added support for this language to Mediawiki, and then the name of the language was misspelled, and took them several years to actually send an email to somebody who can fix the name. This sometimes happens. And people want to add more and more languages all the time. So I find myself like sometimes every few days, sometimes every few weeks, add language, like support for new languages, add the support for new fonts, add support for new keyboards, things like that. So I do commits around that. But yeah, I don't do any big code commits these days. I also write some code for analytics around the usage of various features that I care about in different languages. It could be like the features to which I actually contributed code, at least in the past, which is the Universal Language Selector extension and the Content Translation extension and the Translate extension. And also like general editing. I care quite a lot about how editing in Wikipedia in general, Wikipedia and other Wikimedia projects, how in general it works differently in different languages and in different countries. editing and also reading. So things that people usually don't look at very much. Like, for example, not a lot of people look at article creation and deletion. There's more analytics around article editing and reverts, but not so much about deletion. And since content translation, maybe we'll speak about this, the content translation extension, which is one of the biggest things that my team is famous for. It's an extension for creating pages, so we care about creation and deletion. So I write code for analyzing stuff like that, but that's mostly SQL and a bit of Python.
Oh, okay, yeah, data processing.
It's not really code for Mediawiki.
Right, no one else is running that code.
No, it's mostly myself.
Yeah. I did want to ask about content translation.
Sure.
I mean, I've seen it in use, so I think I understand it. The basic idea is it's not Google Translate. You use some translation service to do a basic translation of an article from another language into your own language.
So let me tell you a little story about why it doesn't even exist.
Okay.
So there is the Translate extension, which has existed for a very long time, developed mostly by Nicholas Lekstrom, who was one of the first guests on this podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
And it exists since, I think, at least 2006 or so. And it's most famously used for translating Mediawiki itself and extensions on the translatewiki.net website. And also for translating fundraising banners and help pages on MediaWiki.org. It's also used by quite a lot of other websites that run on MediaWiki. KDE project is a famous user. There are some others. And this worked quite well. Like by year 2010, this extension was pretty robust, used a lot in a lot of languages. And it's still in development. It's still being developed and improved. But people were asking, could we have something like this for translating articles? And translating articles is quite different from translating software. But long story short, in 2014, we decided in the team that it's about time to try to develop something for translating articles. And we developed content translation. So content translation, even before we speak about machine translation of any kind, Google Translate or whatever, the idea of content translation is that you see the source article in the source language. You have an empty space for writing a new article in your language, and content translation tries to help you as much as it can to do all the boring stuff that should be done by computers, which is things like adapting links. So if you have a link to another page in the source article, and you can find a link to the page to the corresponding page in the target language, content translation will do this automatically for you. Same for images. Images are pretty easy to adapt, and image adaptation is one of the features that people love the most. Absolutely, like every time I speak to people, they love this, that they don't have to find the JPG or PNG file name and copy it with all the brackets and all these things. And you just in one click, you just adapt the image. This is really easy. Templates are harder. Maybe we'll speak about this later. But templates we occasionally manage to adapt automatically, like simple formatting things like bold font and stuff like that, references, mathematical formulas. So all the things that all the things for which you don't need a lot of human intervention, we try to transfer them to the target article as automatically as possible, and make it as easy as possible for the human to write the prose of the article. Now, this is the most basic function. For some languages where it is possible, we also integrate machine translation. We actually do have Google Translate integrated, plugged for most languages.
Okay.
We don't yet have it for English, amusingly, to translate into English. We do have it for translating from English. We also have several other machine translation tools. We have Yandex, the Russian company. We have some services for Basque, for Chinese, and like some special services for particular languages where there was like a specialized group around this language. They developed a machine translation engine, so we're happy to integrate it whenever we can. But this is not the primary thing. This is very convenient for a lot of people. This makes translation faster for a lot of people. But there are also some people who can use machine translation, who have machine translation for their language, but they just prefer to write things from scratch, and that's fine too. Because we provide machine translation for the people who want to use it. We actually discourage people from publishing machine translation without editing it, because machine translation always makes mistakes. We show all kinds of warnings if machine translation was not edited properly. So machine translation is not like it's important, but it's not the primary goal of content translation. The primary goal is just to help people translate quickly and conveniently and skip all the boring parts, like writing repetitive wiki syntax for images and galleries and links and all these little things.
Yeah, right. Because you can use the same images.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The image is probably the same. You have to translate the caption. The image caption.
Well, okay. Right.
You will have to change it. But the image itself, it's the same file name, and if it's on Commons, then it's just the same file, and you don't have to do anything. Same for galleries, and
Right.
So
that makes
that's more or
perfect
less.
sense.
Yeah, that's more or less what we do.
Yeah.
And it has been a pretty successful extension. It was we first deployed it in 2015, and it has been used to translate more than 600,000 articles to all the languages.
Oh wow.
In the 5 years that it has existed. In the last few weeks, it has been breaking records. We've had in the last few weeks, possibly because of the quarantine, we had more than 5,000 articles every week. Before the worldwide quarantine, it was around 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 articles per week. Now it's 5,000.
That's amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe it's related to the fact that people spend more time at home and translate lots of articles.
Yeah, if you literally have nothing else to do, you will go translate a Wikipedia article.
Yep.
That's fantastic. Are there specific languages where it's popular? Do you know, or is it just general?
We have a special page. The content translation extension includes a special page called Special Content Translation Stats. It shows statistics for all the languages, but basically from memory, it's not in front of me right now, but from memory, the most common target language is Spanish.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some other big target languages are Russian, French, Ukrainian, Catalan. Persian is surprisingly big. Vietnamese is very big.
Huh.
Arabic is very big. Yeah, that's more or less.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. So we have to talk about Wikidata, of course, because for anyone dealing with language support on Wikipedia, Wikidata, it seems like those kinds of people get drawn to Wikidata like moths to a flame. Would you agree with that?
Okay. Well, yeah, in a way, certainly.
You actually gave a talk at the last Wikimania where you proposed, correct me if I'm wrong, that every link in Wikitext should be replaced by a link to the Wikidata identifier, the Q code.
Ooh, kind of. Yeah, that was a crazy idea. The subtitle, the title of the talk was "Let's completely change how links work," and the subtitle of that talk was "A Fantasy in 3 Parts." Because it's a total. It's a total fantasy. It's such a. This podcast is called Between the Brackets, right? The wiki link is such a strong feature, such a basic feature of Mediawiki and of Wikipedia, that changing anything around this is a total fantasy. Nevertheless, I totally understand what is great about the wiki link in square brackets. I guess I don't guess, it's just true. It was very convenient and simple to use such a thing when Wikipedia started. It was easier than typing less than a space href equals blah blah blah,
Right.
greater than blah blah blah. It was obviously easier, especially in English. English is a language that doesn't have a lot of morphology. Words don't change a lot. But in other languages, it starts getting trickier because other languages have a lot of morphology. Words change a lot. In Hebrew, it happens. In Russian, it happens. In languages of India, it happens a lot. So you have to use the pipe much more than in English.
I see.
And this is not even the largest problem. Much bigger problems are that if you don't have an article about something in your language, and this could even be English, but there is such an article in another language, or there is some information about this topic in Wikidata, linking to, like, making a red link, it doesn't help you. It doesn't give you anything. It just gives you a link to an empty page. So you can click on the red link and you can write the page. But it's kind of sad that an article about the same topic exists in another language. And to a lot of people, an article in another language is at least marginally more useful than a blank page.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Or like some generic tabular data in Wikidata could be more useful than a blank page. So integrating links, like integrating Wikidata items with links in some smart way that wouldn't piss off people who really love the simple links in square brackets, which is pretty much everybody, that would be a nice idea. How to actually do this, it would probably be very complicated. But yeah, I mean, you can see that people want this from the fact that quite a lot of Wikipedias have a template that does something like this, where you can link to, like, you use a template to link to a Wikidata item when the article doesn't exist. But then this raises the question: when do you use this template, and when do you use the link? And when the article gets written, then who will remove the template and replace it with the usual link, and so on.
Right.
So these are kind of like patchy solutions, and they're different in every language. And why couldn't we just maybe do some kind of a sweeping big thought process and change it? And again, it's a fantasy. It's a huge change, but it tries to solve real problem, and maybe the actual solution to this problem will be something completely different. But at least I'm trying to point out the problem.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. Absolutely, especially for articles that only exist in other languages. There's a somewhat popular template, at least on English language Wikipedia, that lets you specify a language and the page in that language that you want to link to, or it still shows up as a red link, but then in parentheses it says
something
here
like
for
that.
the French version or something.
Yeah, the funny thing about this is that this is very Wikipedia writer oriented, Wikipedia editor oriented, whereas like I'm saying that most people don't know English. There are even fewer people who are Wikipedia editors in the world than the people who know English, or like the people, many more people are Wikipedia readers and not Wikipedia editors. So Wikipedia readers, what they really want, they would really want a link to some useful information in a language they can read. And a Wikipedia editor, like Wikipedia editors are smart, sophisticated people. And no, I mean, I say this out of complete appreciation.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
No, they're sophisticated people. They say, okay, we will link to an article in a language that is most related to this person. So, for example, if it's a French person, we will link to the article in the French Wikipedia. But to a reader who doesn't know French but knows, for example, Polish, this is not so helpful. If there could be Polish Wikipedia article. This would be obviously more useful to somebody who knows Polish but not French. Or if there was a Wikidata page that is automatically translated to Polish, because in Wikidata almost everything can be translated to any language, like the labels of all the properties and all these things. This would be more useful to somebody who knows Polish but not French. So so this problem is this problem is recognized by a lot of people, and there's no big solution, at least yet. I hope there will be someday.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your proposal makes sense. It's consistent. It would work. Let me know that I think this is the first time on the show that we've literally talked about the stuff between the brackets. So that's also exciting. So yeah, speaking of futuristic proposals, Denny Vrandicic, the creator of Wikidata, was on this show last year. He talked about something he was trying to make happen, which was his idea for an abstract Wikipedia. And the basic idea, if I can try to simplify it, is it's great to have Wikidata, but it's not enough, because something like Wikidata can only store a tiny fraction of actual knowledge. I mean, most information you read isn't of the form of, beryllium has an atomic weight of 9. I looked that up.
Yeah.
Usually it's a lot more complex than that. So the idea is to store all the more complex information in this quasi-universal language that Denny developed or is developing, which sort of resembles sentence mapping, where you say this is the subject of the sentence, is the object, and these are the different parts or the conditions, all that kind of thing. Kind of. And then there would be software that would translate from that universal notation to every individual language. So it's actually very interesting that we're talking now, because Denny just very recently came out with his proposal for something he's tentatively calling Wiki Lambda, which would be a new Wikimedia wiki that sort of fills in the missing gap, the missing part of that vision, which is it would hold all the code that translates from that notation to the different languages. And it could potentially hold other universal wiki-related code too. I'm pretty sure you've heard of this overall idea in the Wiki Lambda concept.
Yes, I've heard of it. I heard your interview with Danny where he spoke about this, and he has been floating this idea every few months. He would mention this on relevant mailing lists and various discussion pages. And yes, this is a fascinating idea. It's pretty complicated, but I am pretty sure that it's doable and it's desirable. It will require quite a lot of development, but it's pretty doable. And yes, like yesterday or the day before, he published a very a big detailed proposal. And about a month ago, he published something that looks more like an academic article about this. I somehow managed to read all of this. It was pretty long, but I somehow managed to read all of this.
Very good.
And a couple of days ago, he published a wiki page, several wiki pages on meta.wikimedia.org/wiki/wikilambda with a pretty detailed proposal of how this will work. It looks like a real development plan, and it was quite a lot of details of how this will look like in wiki syntax, at least partially. I love it in general. It says pretty clearly from the start for all the people who are concerned about Wikipedia becoming global or controlled by some global cabal of whoever. It says very clearly from the start that nobody will be forced, no wiki will be forced to use it.
Right.
Only wikis that opt in and write the necessary modules for their languages will use it, which makes perfect sense. This is definitely a good thing for the autonomy of the different communities who write in Wikipedia. I do hope that at least some people in some of the big languages like English and French and German and Russian and some others, Chinese, will adopt this idea at least partially And the reason I hope that this will happen is that this idea will be most useful to the smallest languages, the ones that we spoke about in the beginning of this interview, because they really need this. The smallest languages are those that need this the most, but they are also the languages that have the lowest resources in terms of the number of people who would be able to adapt this software to the needs of their language. Because I read his paper, and basically what his paper says is that there will be probably some kind of a new programming language, not Lua, not JavaScript, not Wikitext, although maybe it will be eventually Lua or JavaScript, but it will probably be eventually some kind of a new programming language. It's probably, it's this point I think is not finalized, but there will probably be some kind of a new programming language, or maybe it will be Lua with a very large new library of functions, or maybe it will be JavaScript with a large new library of functions.
Right.
But these will be functions for generating text in human languages.
Yeah.
And this is not a super difficult problem. It's generating human language in a predictable way is not a very difficult, impossible computer science problem. Understanding text, that's a much more complicated problem. Getting computers to understand text written by humans, that's a much more difficult problem. That's the problem that you have to deal with in machine translation and stuff like that. It will never be solved perfectly. Generating text predictably and reliably from some stable data, that's not a very difficult problem. Nevertheless, for actually doing this will be easier for languages with bigger resources, like English and German and Russian. It will be harder for languages with lower resources because the overlap between the people who know these languages and the people who are good at programming is very small. So that's why I hope that at least some people who I do hope that this idea gets implemented, and I do hope that when it's implemented, some people who know English, as many people as possible who know English and German and so on, learn it, and they will be able to apply this to their languages, and then help people who speak smaller languages to apply it to their languages. I envision people who did this for English or German or Russian, sitting together with somebody who speaks, I don't know, Yoruba, which is a pretty big language, spoken mostly in Nigeria, and helping them write similar things that would output automatically generated articles in Yoruba. So, but for this to happen, some people who speak big languages have to actually learn this language and write these modules, write these functions for their language. I hope it works. I do suspect that this may be a bit of a bottleneck, but I hope it works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those kinds of languages, you'd think potentially, there could be financial resources devoted, whether it's from Wikimedia sources or just general sources. It's a case where maybe a fairly small amount of funding could really accomplish a lot in terms of making a lot of information accessible to a lot of people.
Oh yes.
So that's really interesting that you say that you think the idea could work. It actually it somewhat ties into a personal idea of yours, which is I guess global templates, something like that.
Yeah,
it doesn't tie in directly, but potentially that kind of thing could also live on this Wiki Lambda site, I would think, because it's the same idea of create once and display everywhere as opposed to piecemeal.
Yeah, it's partially related. So first of all, it's not my idea. People have thought of this for many years. I did some archaeology work, and the oldest request to make templates global is from 2004, in Bugzilla. It's it's a very, very old request. And it was the funny thing about this is that that's more or less the year that templates appeared. I think that templates first appeared in 2004 or maybe 3. They weren't there from the start. So this means that almost immediately when they appeared, people were asking to use templates that are stored on one wiki site on another wiki site. And the crazy thing about this bug report is that it was resolved with a feature called scary transclusion.
Right.
So that bug is marked as resolved. The problem is that that feature was had all kinds of issues, and it was never actually enabled on Wikimedia wikis. And it may be enabled on some wiki farms out there. But for example, somebody from Miraheze spoke to me about this, and they told me, yeah, we have a wiki library, we can do this. And when I actually started drilling down into what they do, I found that they don't actually have this enabled. So it was kind of made many years ago, but not really in a satisfactory way that actually allows using a template from one wiki site on another wiki site, which is a big problem because when I very frequently, I talk to people over whatever works. Like it could be email, it could be Zoom, it could be Telegram, could be Skype, could be real life meetings in lots of places. I help people who speak and write in all kinds of small languages of Africa, India, Russia, whatever, and they want to write Wikipedia articles in their language, which is awesome. But then they very frequently ask me, how do I make a table like that? They don't they call it a table. Sometimes they don't even know that it's called a template or an info box or something. Right. But they actually refer to info boxes. And what I have to tell them is that, you have to export this page called template info box scientist from the English Wikipedia. And when they actually do this, they get an XML file. And in this XML file, they have, it very often, if you do it with a cascading export, you get sometimes 10 wiki pages, sometimes 50 wiki pages. I once found a template that when you export it, you get something like 400 wiki pages. Wow. One of the info boxes, it has so many dependent templates and modules and template styles. There are also template styles these days. Oh, okay. And then they import it into the Wikipedia in their language, and then they have to go over all of these pages, all of these pages that were imported, find strings in English, or it could be also from French, it could be also from Russian. They have to find strings manually, line after line, and they have to translate them into their language. And once they do this, it's a fork. And if the original template is changed and gets some new features, they don't get these new features. They have to export it all over again. So this sucks because with Mediawiki extensions, this works really robustly. Mediawiki extensions have a Translate Wiki where all the human strings are translated, and there's a very clear separation between the PHP and JavaScript code and the human readable strings, which can be translated very easily. And when a Mediawiki extension is updated, all the wikis and all the languages get the same software, but the strings are updated separately. So templates and Lua modules, which are quite similar to templates, they are software. Just like extensions are software. They're a bit different kind of software, but they're nevertheless software. So their deployment and their internationalization should be as convenient and robust as the internationalization of extensions. So this is my hope. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's definitely doable, and it's definitely very high in the list of things that the community wants. It's like several times there were proposals to do such a thing. Again, I told you, I did some archaeology work in Bugzilla and Fabricator and all kinds of relevant pages on Meta and MediaWiki.org. It came up many times. Every time people non-vote for it. Lots of people support it. Almost nobody is against this. And like for a lot of like resourcing reasons, a lot of software architecture, performance, security, caching, whatever reasons, this hasn't been done yet. I do hope that this will be done someday soon. Actually, the really big news are related to WikiLambda. So WikiLambda, once it's implemented, so WikiLambda is not my idea. WikiLambda is Danny's idea. But WikiLambda, by its nature, it will have to be global because it will have to have some kind of a global data storage, which will probably be at least partly from Wikidata, maybe completely from Wikidata. And it will have a library of functions that will create the abstract, language-neutral information.
Right.
And then it will have functions that create the texts for all the different languages. But the abstract functions will be the same for all the languages. So this is quite similar to what I'm suggesting with global templates. It's a central repository of functions. And it's software. Call it. You can call it functions. You can call it modules. You can call it templates, whatever. But it's code. It's essentially code. But one thing that almost never gets any attention, but it's a huge thing, is that we have software in Gerrit, which is primarily core and extensions, and also so for all the users of Mediawiki, Gerrit is relevant as a place where core and extensions are developed. For the particular case of Wikimedia wikis, that's also where the configuration files of the servers are maintained, which means which extensions are enabled on which wikis, and what is the configuration for core for each language, and so on. And in practice, Gerrit is not very accessible to the large crowd of Wikipedia editors.
Sure.
It like the intention. I'm pretty sure. I remember the days when Gerrit was first discussed around 2011. The intention was actually to make it accessible. That's not what actually happened, because in theory anybody can get access to Gerrit. It's you basically just have to ask and you get an account, but to actually get your extension reviewed and deployed is pretty difficult. So Gerrit in practice is difficult to access for usual Wikipedia editors, whereas templates and gadgets and the Scribunto modules are very, technically they are very easy for them to access because they are basically just wiki pages.
Yeah, sure. Anyone can go in and make any change. Yeah.
Yeah, and this difference is not appreciated enough. And
right.
And templates and modules are maintained as wiki pages. So the feeling is, and it's true, that they are essentially owned by the community, and it's good. The problem is that the communities in different wikis cannot collaborate on developing templates in a convenient way, and this really sucks.
Right. Yeah, you can't collaborate, and of course you're repeating work that other people have been doing. Potentially, hundreds of different communities are doing the exact same thing. Yeah, and you also I see these clusters of wiki arising, where, for example, languages spoken around the former Soviet Union, they mostly copy templates from the Russian Wikipedia, and Russian Wikipedians are actually pretty great with this. They are really happy to help all these small languages around the former Soviet Union, but this shouldn't be actually needed. I see things like people from the Russian Wikipedia who don't know, Kyrgyz, for example, or Bashkir on one of these former Soviet Union languages. They are asking for permissions on these languages, on the wikis in these languages. They don't know these languages, but they do know wiki text. So they help copy the templates from the Russian Wikipedia into these languages, and then they just say, okay, I'm done copying the template. Now you have to go over the strings and fix them. So that's kind of the Russian cluster. There's also a Spanish cluster
There are people from the Spanish and Basque and Catalan Wikipedia who are very active in developing templates, and they intentionally try to make them reusable in different languages, and they export them to certain languages that are willing to use them. And then there's the French cluster also. So and this is a bit sad. Like, there's so much innovation there, and there's so much skill there, amazing skill, which is not appreciated as it's design skill, it's software development skill. Like in a way, they do really robust software engineering work and software design work, and they just cannot collaborate with each other across wikis in a convenient way. And this is really sad, because if a new wiki appears, and new wikis and new languages keep appearing all the time, and if they don't happen to have friends in the Russian Wikipedia or the Spanish Wikipedia, they're just on their own. And
Sure.
They're just stuck with a basic installation of Mediawiki without any templates or modules or gadgets. They have to do everything by hand, and they are just stuck with text and images, which is important, but in essence, so much of the functionality of the Wikipedias in the bigger languages is in templates.
Sure. So what would a global universal info box look like in practice?
I don't know. I guess the same. I mean, not how would it? Well, okay, sorry. Go ahead. No, I mean, I can. So first of all, there would be, I guess, some differences because, for example, if you look at the French Wikipedia, they have a very elegant info box for cities. They have like a very nice background image there. It's not there in the English Wikipedia. Whatever. If the English Wikipedia doesn't want it and the French Wikipedia does want it, they should have the freedom to have their own design. But the general idea of having an image of the skyline of the city at the top,
right?
and the name of the mayor,
right, okay, yeah. No, I don't mean what would the display be. Of course, that's who knows. Hopefully, it would be nice. I mean, what would it look like on the back end? Would it be a template or just a tiny stub of a template, and most of the work would be done by a Lua Scribunto module?
Doesn't really matter, if you ask me. It should be both. There are some things that are more convenient in Lua. There are some things that are more convenient in Wikitext. And really, the community on the wikis should have the freedom to choose which language to use for which parts. The important part is that there should be some kind of basic code that can be commonly stored in a common place and accessible from all the wikis, just like images on Commons are accessible from all the wikis.
Right.
With images, it's simpler because it's just a file name. But with templates and parameters, it's more complicated. But I imagine that there will be a central storage of modules and templates, and quite possibly the central storage for Wikilambda functions will be the same or very similar. Like maybe it will be even on the same wiki, or maybe it will be a separate wiki, but it will work with a very similar technology for delivering this code to all the different wikis. And the wikis will have right to override whatever functionality that they don't want to use from the global storage with their own templates, or maybe they won't use the central storage at all. That's fine as well. That's more or less the idea. Like I guess for example that if a template with the same name exists on your wiki, then the template on your local wiki overrides the central template. Just like it works with Commons. Again, like if you have a file with the same name uploaded to your local wiki, then you will see the file from your local wiki and not the file from Commons.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It makes sense. I was wondering mostly about where all the translations would live, if they would...
Ooh, that's an excellent question.
Okay.
So what I imagine what I imagine is that there will probably be an instance of the Translate extension on the same wiki repository, the same central repository. There will be the Translate extension, just like on Translate Wiki.
Right.
And the human-readable strings in the templates will be translatable through an instance of the Translate extension. The Translate extension will probably have to be adapted for this because, like, if you imagine the Translate extension in the way in which it's used on Translate Wiki, it has a project selector. So there's a list of projects. For example, Mediawiki Core is a project. Visual Editor is a project. Semantic Media Wiki is a project. It's actually several projects. So it's like several hundreds of such projects on Translate Wiki. With templates, it can be much larger because there could be, I guess, tens of thousands of templates, maybe hundreds of thousands of templates. So the project selector, I guess, will have to be more sophisticated and allow like finding templates to translate more easily. But it's not a huge change. Yeah, this is one of the steps towards developing localization support for templates. It actually should be one of the first steps. It can actually be done even before they become global, because already today you have templates that should be translatable. For example, on Commons itself. So if you look at an image on Commons, underneath the image, there are usually some templates with the license and with the information about the image, and so on. And these templates are kind of translatable, not in the most robust way. They're translatable with all kinds of hacks that are local to Commons, but they're kind of translatable. Yeah. This could be much better. So a robust localization system for templates, I guess it can be one of the first things to develop in this big global templates project. And even before templates actually become shareable across wikis, such a translation system will already be useful for Commons, also for Wikidata, also for Meta, and I guess for a lot of other websites that use Mediawiki and need to be multilingual in some way. Wikimedia is certainly not the only organization that uses multilingual wikis.
Yeah. Yeah, it all makes sense. If people want to read more about this idea, or I mean, what's the next step with this? Are you trying to get more buy-in? Are you trying to get funding for it?
Yeah, I'm trying to get buy-in. How should I put it? Such a thing, developing such a project will have to be done by. It will have to be done by software developers, but it doesn't matter who does this. It will have to be sooner or later reviewed and approved by the core platform developers, the people who are looking at the most internal parts of how Mediawiki works, the parser and all the complicated caching mechanisms about which I know very little. This will have to be reviewed and approved by them, I guess, through an RFC, and the code will have to be reviewed. So this needs buy-in from the engineers who do this, and I guess that most of the people who do this are employed by the foundation. So yeah, it will have to be reviewed by them sooner or later. I think that you should interview some of these people on this podcast. Basically, one of the big, from what I know, because I'm really, really not an expert, but from what I know, one of the big challenges to carrying this out will be developing some kind of a modern system for delivering things from one wiki to another. Now, the two big examples in which delivering content from one wiki to another are Commons and Wikidata. So in Commons, it's images, and in Wikidata, it's pieces of structured data. And from what I understood, there are actually several other less famous things. There's the global user page, for example.
Oh, okay, right.
So on Wikimedia sites, if you have if you don't have a user page on a certain wiki, but you have a user page on meta.wikimedia.org, then that would be your global user page. So that's a less famous thing than Commons or Wikidata, but it's a thing. There are also global preferences, and I think that there are also global abuse filters. So some more things are global. But the crazy part about this, and again, I haven't looked at the code myself, I'm just quoting other people with whom I spoke about this. The crazy part about this is that the delivery of this content from one wiki to another was implemented separately in each of these cases. It was done separately for Commons, separately for Wikidata, separately for global user pages, and so on, which is not so great. Again, I might be wrong. I might be wrong about the technical details. You should interview somebody who knows this better than I do. But from what I heard, there is quite a lot of desire to develop a single component in MediaWiki that would deliver all kinds of dependencies from one wiki to another in a way that is robust and easily cacheable and fast and reusable. And the great thing about this is that if such a component is developed, then it will also be immediately useful for WikiLambda because it needs the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
But again, these are things in which I'm really not an expert. It's just because I've been speaking about global templates so much in the last year or two to so many people. This is a topic that I hear coming up from a lot of the people who are involved in the most internal parts of the software there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It makes sense that that the code to do all these different things has been pretty patchy and independent or unorganized because a lot of the whole Wikipedia and Wikimedia structure it's sort of been retroactively modified to be more universal and all that. It certainly didn't start out that way. Obviously, if all of this were being created from scratch, a lot of things would be designed differently, so that you wouldn't be viewing each wiki as independent of every other wiki, that kind of thing. So okay. Is there anything people listening to this can do to register their support for this idea, or is that not really necessary? Is it more? Is there the general set? Does everyone generally agree that it's already that it's a good idea, and it's just a matter of getting the I don't know if you'd call it political, but some kind of will to get it done.
You do need political will, I guess, but. I do very much want to hear people's feedback about this. And when I say people, I mean absolutely everybody, no matter what is anybody's level of technical expertise. To do this, you can go to mediawiki.org and just type global templates in the search box, and you will find it. And there's a page for discussion, global templates/discuss. Quite a lot of people expressed their support there. That there's one person who didn't like this, and he says he or she says a reasonable thing that this may lead to code bloat in the templates. Because some wikis will want some functionality and other wikis will not want this.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
That's a reasonable piece of feedback. That was like one person who wrote on that page that they are against this. Lots of other people just said that they support it. On some other talk page, somebody said that this proposal doesn't take into account the differences in design of templates between different wikis. And again, I absolutely respect this kind of feedback. And I think that this does take into account the differences in design, because I very clearly say in this proposal that this will be optional. This repository is only for the things that are common. If something is not common, if something is different, then it should remain local. I'm not saying that all templates should be global. Actually, somebody even said that I shouldn't call it global templates. I should call it something like shareable templates, which is fine. I call it global templates because it's just a similar name to some other features like global preferences, global user page, global JavaScript, and so on. But fine. I can call it shareable templates. It's the same thing. It's optional. So yeah, like these are the two negative pieces of feedback that I received, and I value this. I'm very happy about this. I really don't want to ignore this. I want to hear all kinds of feedback, positive, negative, whatever. So just go to global templates, read the proposals there. There's a short version of the proposal. There's a very long version of the proposal. They are translated to several languages, and you're welcome to translate them to your language, whoever you are, if you're listening. And you are very welcome to express your opinions on the talk pages. I'm very, very interested in hearing them.
Yeah, okay. I'll put a link to that page from the podcast episode page for people who go to the podcast site. Cool.
And yeah, I mean, I'm seeing this momentum now with Wiki Lambda, and Danny, like you called me a celebrity. Danny is also quite a celebrity. The founder of Data. So Danny is getting some traction for his proposal, and I'm happy about this. There's quite a lot of overlap in these two proposals, and I think that both are needed. The templates are obviously much more familiar to Wikipedia editors, to pretty much all MediaWiki users in the world. Templates are more familiar than the new thing that Wiki Lambda will implement. That's why I think that templates should become shareable first before Wiki Lambda, because this will help create some kind of a global community of developers, and upon this global community that will be created with templates, a global community of people who create language renderers. That's how Wiki Lambda calls them, renderers.
Right. Oh yeah.
But whatever, it's a development plan details.
Yeah, I mean, between the three things of Wikidata, the store that currently exists, and Wiki Lambda, and the global templates idea, between those three things, once they're all implemented, you could potentially, construct an entire language Wikipedia on the fly, I think.
Something like that, if you actually implement the functions for that language. But yeah.
Well, yeah, sure.
I would also say, you interview on this podcast a lot of people who are not from Wikimedia, not from the Wikimedia community, who are a lot of external users from all kinds of companies and organizations and governments and so on. Right. And maybe this could also be useful for them. If I'm not mistaken, images on Commons can be also used on other sites and not only on
that's definitely true.
Wikimedia sites.
Yeah.
So templates could also be useful for other wikis. Like templates developed by Wikimedia people could be useful for other wikis. So,
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you see an email on the Mediawiki mailing list or one of those saying, how do I copy the whatever info box this is from Wikipedia? How can I use it on my wiki? That kind of thing.
Yeah, you export an XML file with 400 pages.
Yeah, right. It always devolves into that. Are you sure you want to do this? I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, it's a need that people have. On the other, there are tools like Semantic MediaWiki and Cargo and all those page forms that make things easier than the Wikipedia equivalent would be to for setup on one's own wiki. Anyway, that's a whole separate conversation. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, things that are useful on Wikipedia will often be useful outside of Wikipedia. And of course, if you have a Wikipedia-like setup, I can't even think of there are examples of this where you literally have a bunch of different wikis for different languages all displaying the same thing. and you really want it to be like Wikipedia, then you could obviously use the same tools for a much smaller data set. From my consulting experience, there have been cases where people ask, "Does this make sense for us? We have a site and we want to show it in these 4 different languages. How should we do it? Should we do it the way Wikipedia does, or just have everything on one wiki?" Yeah. So yeah, there's some potential enterprise Mediawiki usage of it. That actually gets me to something else I thought was interesting. Before that, briefly, where would these live? These global templates, would they be on Commons, on Wiki Lambda? Or have you thought about that at all? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but
it actually doesn't really matter. Amusingly, there were several discussions about this, and this question is so unimportant. Really,
yeah.
It should be a new wiki, but really, like installing a new instance of Mediawiki is not very complicated. Or maybe reusing Commons, but whatever. It doesn't matter. Probably a new wiki, but whatever.
Oh, really? Okay, fine.
It's
because once Wiki Lambda exists, it's sort of given, if that's already a space for global functionality, global code of some kind or another, then it seems like a natural home. All right, anyway. Yeah, doesn't matter. So yeah, I had a question. Speaking again about Wiki Lambda, do you think potentially this is just because it's come up recently or is just proposed recently? Do you think potentially once people learn this universal notation and get comfortable with it and it's shown to be actually usable, potentially it could spread out beyond Wikipedia? To people writing books in this notation, that sort of
thing. Not books that people will enjoy reading. I heard, for example, that I heard several stories. I don't know, maybe these are urban legends or maybe not. I heard several stories of people who found a way to publish books without actually writing anything. They simply found all kinds of ways to pull publicly available data from governments and companies.
Well, okay.
And they automated the printing of these books and they published it on Amazon. And some people want this information printed on paper, so people pay for this on Amazon. And that's it. Like once the software is developed, they just buy these books. And I don't know how true this is, but I heard that there are people actually making money selling books like that.
Yeah,
I can imagine Wiki Lambda being used for something like that, but it cannot go too far because Wiki Lambda, text generated by Wiki Lambda, by its nature, it will be pretty repetitive, which is okay.
Right.
Which is okay for certain kinds of prose, certain kinds of stories. This is okay, and this can go beyond Wikipedia in certain scenarios. But I think that even Danny himself said in an interview to you and in other places that Wiki Lambda is not supposed to replace all text writing. It is only supposed to replace certain things that can be predictable and stable. I don't think that it can that you can use Wiki Lambda to write the story of I don't know some famous battles in the Second World War or something. This will have to be written by humans. But stories about I don't know, lakes. There are thousands of lakes in the world. Like all the lakes have depth and location and things like that. These basic things, they can probably be written by Wiki Lambda. I'll even go further. I saw some people. I won't mention the language, but let's say some people from one country writing articles in a language of another country where they don't live, but they learned that language, and they were writing articles in Wikipedia in that other language. And I saw them writing article after article after article. Like they were like right next to me. We were sitting on the same couch at a certain Wikimedia event.
I see.
And they were writing articles. I mean, well, they did learn the language. But they were writing pretty much the same article over and over. They were writing articles about certain people.
I see. Okay.
I don't remember. Maybe academics, or maybe some famous officers in the British Army or the German Army or something like that. And if you write an article about a professor, okay, this professor was born in a certain year in a certain town, and they went to a certain university, and then they submitted their thesis in a certain year, and they received certain awards. And a lot of this can be done by copying and pasting and just changing some words and numbers.
Sure.
And this could definitely be done by Wikilambda. And
and there's a long history of people writing bots to just create Wikipedia articles. And there's certain languages where the majority, or sometimes even the vast majority of articles are bot written, from what I understand.
That too. And Wikilambda would be definitely, I mean, it is an idea. Yeah, it's a step towards Wikilambda. Wikilambda would be much better than this.
Okay. Yeah.
Wikilambda would be able to do the same thing, but in a much more robust way.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I thanks for reminding me that I asked Denny the exact same question. I guess I'm more hopeful about this universal notation thing than either of you, because, well, I mean, I'm not repeating anything you don't know, but if it's a difference between something that's clunkily written or no text at all in a certain language, or in hundreds of languages, then obviously the thing that looks like it was written by a computer would be better. And second, once you have this notation, there's no limit to how what's the word, how creative or supple you can be with the generated language. If you have a software that says, well, I already used this verb for this concept once, and now in this next sentence I'll use a different verb, that kind of thing, to make it flow better. I don't know.
You could definitely program this, I think. This doesn't sound like an impossible computer science problem.
Right. All right.
But still, there are stories that you cannot get a computer to write. Stories that are so unique that lots of stories that you just need a real person to write them, and that's fine. It's good. Getting people to write things in their languages is a good thing.
Yeah.
I actually have a different dream now that in the last few years people are speaking so much about automation and artificial intelligence and self-driving trucks and all these things. And if more and more things will be automated, and I last time I went to San Francisco, I visited an Amazon Go store without cashiers.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of spooky, but it works.
Right.
So,
you basically just take stuff off the shelf and leave, and you're done.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, okay. It works. It's kind of weird, but I guess we'll get used to this someday. I read somewhere that truck driver is the number one most common profession in the U.S. was close to that. So if trucks will become automated, what will all these truck drivers do? And I don't know, so this gets people to all kinds of political or economic discussions about universal basic income or the need to retrain people to do something completely different, and nobody quite knows what.
Right.
I don't know. I have this crazy idea that maybe suddenly people will become much more creative. People will start writing more. People will start singing more. People will start painting more. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy too optimistic. I don't know, but I really don't think that computers should totally replace people in writing. This is neither desirable nor possible, but people can replace computers in writing some things, and Wiki Lambda, I'm pretty sure, is good for that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm with you for most of that. Like everything except the painting thing. I think. Yeah, definitely. And I think this whole thing opens up a lot of possibilities for I guess you could call it human computer collaboration. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I can imagine, for example, Wiki Lambda creating thousands of useful articles in, I don't know, Zulu or whatever, and then some, I don't know, 17-year-old person who speaks Zulu sees this online and says, okay, this is kind of interesting, but that's kind of repetitive. But I know Zulu. I could write Zulu. What if can I improve this? And if this gets people to say, okay, I can do better than this, and start writing in their languages, then mission accomplished.
Sure. Yeah. And to get back to the original, the subject. I mean, if it helps to slow down the deaths of small languages, or gets people.
It's not even about the death of small languages, which is kind of sad, but it's not even about that. It's about the fact that I am sad about every language that dies, because if a language dies, a certain way of thinking dies with it, a certain history and culture dies with it.
Right, yeah.
But I'm not even talking about that, because that's more of a romantic thing, which I totally identify with. But I'm talking about something much more practical. I'm talking about schools. If you cannot have schools in your language, if you have to learn a foreign language to actually go to school, which is such a basic thing in developed countries, this is the thing that drags a country, drags a whole culture, a whole society down. And if something helps people to get more textbooks in their language, something helps people to realize that their language can be used on computers, and maybe this gets somebody even more creative and writing even better books or better encyclopedic articles or whatever. This is wonderful. I'm reminded of the story of you know Hebrew and I know Hebrew, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, the founder of the modern Hebrew language revival. He was not the first one who started writing in Hebrew in the modern times. There were people before him. And when he was, I think, 14 or 15 or so, he saw, he was learning in a religious school, like all the Jewish boys back then, and he saw a book in Hebrew, which was a translation of Robinson Crusoe.
Huh.
And it's a very weird translation in a very old kind of Hebrew, which is barely readable for modern Hebrew speakers. But he loved that book so much that he became the leader of a movement to create a modern Hebrew language and culture. And that's the kind of thing I hope can happen if we start with something that is repetitive, kind of useful, but repetitive and maybe not sounding very creative. But this will be enough to spark the curiosity of somebody who will want to make something better in their language. That will be really a great success.
Yeah. If it helps people, helps people participate in the global conversation, I guess you could say, as opposed to just being spectators to it.
Yep.
It's definitely that's an extremely worthy goal. Great. Well, I think that's a good way to end this podcast. This is a long one. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. And I guess we'll we'll do our Hebrew thing after this. If there's anything left to
Can I
talk about.
make a little surprise for you towards the end?
Yeah, well, this is it. We're towards the end now, so go ahead.
Okay, so here's a little surprise. And I think that somebody did something similar already on one of the episodes, but let me try to do this. I hope it works. Do you hear this?
I do. Ah.
Something like this.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, right. I'm really touched by that. Oh, thank you. Nice. That's the what is that? What was that you were playing? I can't even. Is that a piano?
That was a piano, yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice. Cool. Well, I guess you noted a few times that you were a listener to the podcast. It's really it's cool, and I've talked to you a few times about it. It's great to have your support and your positive feedback, and
Sure.
Nice. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. So Amir, it's always great talking to you, but it was great talking to you here, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
And this has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Amir Aharoni of the Wikimedia Foundation, for a very informative discussion. There's also an accompanying mini episode of us talking in Hebrew if you're into that kind of thing. In any case, stay safe, stay productive, and I'll see you next time.